Welcome to or welcome back to Founders in Jeans. I'm your host, Emily Jean. And before we get into the episode, I just want to say a huge thank you so much for listening to my podcast. And yeah, I just wanted to come on here and say thank you so much. I also wanted to say that if you enjoy the show, feel free to leave a review on Spotify or Apple, wherever you're listening to this, and also to follow us. You can follow us on Spotify, of course. You can follow us on Instagram at Founders in Jeans. You can also find me on Instagram at emily.jeans, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect with people on there, and I have a lot of good conversations from listeners. Also, you can always leave a bad review for us. I'm totally fine with that. And in fact, I think that's exciting. I would love to know what we can do to improve. So you can also leave comments below and let me know what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. I actually do read every single one. We also have a newsletter that comes out once a week, so you can get all the updates from us. We also put in some weekly business and marketing updates in there, as well as some personal notes from me. You can subscribe to that on my LinkedIn, also through the Instagram and in the show notes below. Anyways, that is all from me. I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. I hope it's a good one, and I'll chat to you soon. Noemi Ceapa of the Consulting Studio. Welcome to Founders in Jeans. I am so excited to chat to you today. Before we get started, for people who have not heard of you yet, can you give a little bit of a background about yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Noemi, the founder of the Consulting Studio. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, branding expert, and a coach. I do personal branding and business branding. I spent years working behind the scenes with million-dollar companies, big brands that we all love and use, learning what makes people buy and why, like the actual reality, not the theory of it. And a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly new ones, they struggle to stand out, to be seen as an authority in their field. They think they need a better logo, a better website, or more followers. But after a decade, having worked behind the scenes with like Coca-Cola and the likes, I know that the problem isn't that surface level logo. It's really that deeper messaging and how we position ourselves. And most people don't really know the difference between the two. So I help women that are new to business cut through the noise and build a brand that both feels aligned to them and feels true to them, and building it around a unique message that also really connects with the people you're trying to reach.
Yeah, I am so excited to chat to you today too, because I think that you are going to have so many practical takeaways for business owners and founders. There's just so much, your wealth of knowledge, I can already tell. I want to kind of go back to the beginning though. I'm curious, what originally drew you to branding in the first place? Because that's not only a pretty general term, but it's kind of an interesting path to take as a creative, as a marketer. So talk to me, like, was there a specific moment when you realized that you were really interested in that?
There were probably several, but it was really that powerful backstage work that we kept doing. So I was working for the agencies that would then consult for Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Colgate and those kinds of brands. And it was like, wow, I never realized how much thought actually goes into how a product looks and sounds and the advertising and testing everything and make sure it's aligned. But it was really one specific moment that is more recent that really kind of put a stamp on my own path. And I was working with a massive family-owned business, 3 generations in, very traditional. And classic story, they had positioned themselves for the last 200 years that they were around, like this budget-friendly option. Reliable, absolutely, but premium, not at all. And it was just like, not who we are. And they finally decided to rebrand and reposition themselves as premium for one particular side of the business. And I was leading the brand launch at this huge industry event. Everything had to communicate that shift, that new positioning, not just like looking pretty on the surface or some kind of impressive, superficial aspect, but really feel different in every way that the brand showed up. So I designed the entire experience with that new positioning in mind. Every detail, every touch point, every interaction had to say, this is who we are now. And I remember the day before we opened, and the CEO's elderly father, so basically second generation in, who had already seen the business start from the ground up. This man had spent his entire life building this company. And I watched, and I don't mean this with arrogance, but I watched his jaw literally drop. Like, he just stood there completely still and staring. And he came over to me and said, like, I never knew we could be this.
Mm.
And that moment just really stuck with me, that complete transformation of the product didn't change. I mean, yes, there was an upgrade, but fundamentally it was the same product, the same direction of the business. It was just a huge lift in the way we show up. And suddenly this business that had been around forever, that people always knew in a certain way, was now showing a completely different side of them that was so much stronger and more aligned with the actual quality of the product. And it brought everything to life in a new light. So that moment really stuck with me because, well, for one, it felt like a lot of personal feedback as well and an accomplished project. But that huge transformation, that's really what, I mean, you don't really see the transformation in big brands. They're just always playing at that higher level. But for us in the small business world, that transformation is very real in terms of the message or how you come across and the experience that you invite your customers into. So that's the moment that really stuck with me. I was like, there's a lot more to this.
I love that. That's incredible. Like, such an amazing experience to have as well. Was that when you already had the consulting studio, or was that before this?
Oh, not at all. That was many, many years ago. The consulting studio is actually born out of a layoff. It was not something that I've long been planning for, but I also knew that in the corporate world, like once I got promoted to a certain level of seniority, I was like, that's going to be fairly predictable and easy. If I stay around for another 10, 15 years, I know I can get to whatever fancy title. And at that moment, for me, it really became more of but this is not really what I want. So once I was laid off, and to my own surprise, I was so relieved when that finally happened. I was like, wow, I really need to do something different. And that's when I started to put together like, okay, what path have I been on? Where is my skill set and what do I love most? And just in that moment of like being at a crossroads, a friend of mine reached out like, hey, I'm starting my business. I've been in corporate for so long, but I want to start something of my own. Can you help me? And for me, it was this like super fun, super easy, like, oh my gosh, here's the coolest thing in the world. And she was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is so hard for me. Like, where'd you get those ideas from, right? It was kind of like that huge difference. So for me, it was like, wait, I can have fun with this and people can pay me for something that's really easy and fun for me. So that was, it took a lot longer after that first experience with that, premium branding, but that is how I got started in the small business world.
Yeah, I love that. So you're seeing a need and you're seeing that need being fulfilled and you know that you have a talent for it and then you make the transition. It sounds like pretty naturally. I love that. That's incredible. I think for people when they hear consulting studio, that's a pretty broad term. So can you describe exactly what you guys do at the consulting studio?
Yes. So branding is the core expertise. And then there are two paths. One is personal branding when you're the face of the business. That's typically coaches, consultants. When we're really selling our expertise, or product-based business, that is the business branding side. So where what you're selling is quite separate from you. Both of those, what they have in common and where I'm really an expert at is, how do you stand out? What makes you unique? How do you communicate your message in a way that really lands with people and reverse engineer everything that you are doing and you're putting out from your ideal client's perspective? So that can be a done with you type of engagement where I walk someone through all of the steps and we build it together, or a done for you service, which is more of a consulting engagement, where you don't want to go through all the steps. You're at a bigger growth and scaling phase, and you just really want a specific answer or specific transformation, in which case I come in and then you have that sweet shortcut.
You have worked with not only in your backgrounds, obviously prior to the consulting studio, but now you've worked with so many different companies. Can you tell me, what would you say is like the number one thing that most people get completely wrong about branding?
It's because we don't know how to communicate the value of either our expertise or of our product. We don't know how to share with the world the gift of whatever our business does in a way that's really simple. And if you're like writing 3 paragraphs to explain what you do, then you haven't gotten there yet. So we're really looking for that 1 or 2 sentences. This is what I do. And I've seen that on both ends. I have a product-based business, whether it's cosmetics or tech, or it doesn't matter. Or if I'm the face of the business, both sides are like, well, I know it's a really great service or product that I have for people, but I don't know how to make it sound in a way that makes people want to buy. Not in a pushy way, but in a way that really makes the service appealing. Because most of us, we don't go solopreneur or entrepreneur and work 100 hours a week just because, oh yeah, wouldn't this be fun? We want to share a passion with the world, but if we can't communicate that in a way that's valuable to our ideal client, it doesn't matter if you have the best product in the world, your message is not going to land. So really, I help with that. Let's call it a translation work, if you will, from there's something really cool going on here, and this person has this need for what you're offering, and then how do you make that connection? Because it's way more than logos, colors, and fonts.
Yeah.
That's almost not as important as like the message and how you're coming across. So it's really that translation work.
Right. And you have also focused specifically on women in the early stages of a business. But why did you choose to go that route?
Because that is where we struggle the longest. Once we get off the ground, and if your business has crossed like $1 million threshold, then you can already pay people to solve certain problems, day and night for you. But in those early stages, you're not going to get off the ground unless your message is resonating, simply put. And also because it was my journey and my own struggle as well. When I left corporate, I was actually my first ideal client. I was like, how do I take all this stuff that I know? And it really took longer than expected to just keep applying what I know to myself and my business, to keep clarifying, to enhance, to strategize, to implement and execute. And because when we start a business, and regardless in what industry it is, like we have this one thing that we want to share with the world, one skill or one product, but we actually need 10 new skills around this thing in order to be able to take off our business. So that is such a critical make or break. And even statistically, like in pretty much every developed country, most businesses, I think it's 90%, fail in the first couple of years.
Right.
Because we're not able to make a real impact in our ideal client's life. I'll leave it at that.
What would you say, having worked with so many businesses, especially in their early beginnings, is there kind of a common denominator at a business that will succeed past those first 5 years?
There's a lot of aspects to that, and it's definitely not just branding. So let's replace the word brand maybe with messaging to make it more palatable for everyone. But there's also sales, there's repeatable systems, because if you're having to do every single thing in your business, and I'm not even talking about like big scale automation, but there are so many facets of that you need to keep an eye out on, and how you're generating leads, how you're converting them, how you're maintaining, nurturing relationships with clients. So there's really, what I do is one part of that, and it's the groundwork for all of the messaging throughout. Then there's vertically all the other areas to consider around lead generation, sales, customer loyalty, have people keep coming back and do business with you or refer other ideal clients to you. So it's a much bigger cycle. So that struggle really early on is not just like building one slice, but you have to build the whole ecosystem while you're learning how to walk and how to run. But you have to think of the bigger picture as well as the day-to-day smaller steps.
Yeah. I'm curious about your own experience as well, building your own business after working with so many other companies. What has been the most surprising part that's come up for you in this process?
De-corporatizing my experience. De-corporatizing my language, thinking in big goals and big initiatives and big fancy strategic goals. And it was really just bringing us down to, no, it's how do you get to hold a presentation? How do you publish your first post? How do you create your first offer? Very simple things that incorporate your one part of, a really large team. So you're very used to one initiative for you, it means just like I only own 5% of this because there's all the other teams that are helping with sales and operations and execution, customer relationship management. And so it's streamlining everything to what do I do step by step that are no longer those big steps. They're really small, tangible steps. And then how do I stop using corporate speak? This took me the longest, and it was annoying even to myself of like, we don't use everyday language, everyday English in corporate. We use such fancy words, and that is how you demonstrate. It's part of how you demonstrate your skill set and your intellect, showing that you're qualified. But when you're on your own, like all of those credentials and the fancy language and the big picture thinking, they no longer matter. So it was really adapting all of that skill set to a very grassroots level. That was something I did not see coming at all. And I see so many of my clients also struggle with this like very polished thinking. And it's really like, how do you get down to the people that you're now trying to serve? They're so different from who you were before, and streamlining and simplifying that.
Right. I read a quote once somewhere, and it essentially was saying that very intelligent people are able to communicate complicated ideas simply. And it's one of the reasons why Neil deGrasse Tyson is so incredible, is because he can take very complex scientific concepts and he can communicate them to the masses in an easy way. And I think that's a little bit of what you're getting at here. That's a very unique trait, and it's not easy to come by, which is why, of course, we have experts and professionals like you to help us along with it. But you've said in the past that you primarily focus on what actually makes people buy, not the theory, but the reality. What is the biggest difference between those?
Depending on how we want to look at it, but let's say in the small business world, we tend to think at that superficial level of logos, colors, fonts, everything needs to look polished, or it's the best discount, or the best service, or the best product. But in reality, when you compare that with big brands really invest incredible amounts of money to find out what specifically their ideal clients resonate with. It's learning how to message to a much higher level. So if you think of it as a pyramid, and at the very bottom you think, well, here's the features. Let's say a car, here's a fancy engine, here's all the things that went into it. Then you go a level higher, and then you think, well, functionally, what does that get me? Well, it gets me there faster, it's more comfortable, all those cool things. And then you go a level up into an emotional level. Well, when you have a fancy car like that, you're seen in a different way. It gives you pride and satisfaction to drive that. But if you go another level, and that is kind of the hidden one that most small businesses never really tap into, it's messaging to an identity. Because like Rolex, Ferrari, and I'm just giving examples here in the same train of thought, they're messaging to that accomplished person. Cool, best brand in the world, then I'm doing the best I possibly can for my child, and I'm the best parent I can be in that particular category, let's say. So big brands, what they've learned is to deconstruct their entire process and message that highest level. There's a reason why in all of those ads, you always see sunshine, large rooms, everything's modern, it's comfy, it's tidy, everyone's happy and smiling, not just the baby, but also the parents. There's a reason why it's always set up that way. So there's an entire mechanism that big brands have decoded as to like what actually makes people buy. And that is where you're communicating in an arena where the price doesn't matter anymore. Or like, sure, if you were to charge like 100,000 more than what it actually costs, it wouldn't work. But in the small business world, we often think of like, well, pricing and discounts and make sure that we're the cheapest and the best or the fastest. But it's really not just that. And that translation of like, who are you trying to reach? and
Yeah.
what are their deepest aspirations. So what really makes people buy is that identity level messaging. Who do I get to become if I buy your product or service? There is a reason
Mhm.
why certain types of people resonate with, let's say, Apple products or Bose headphones or our rings and all those things,
Right.
because it says something about who I am. So even if you're a solopreneur and you are just starting, think about the deeper thing that you're actually selling. People
Mhm.
don't buy a watch, they don't buy features, they don't buy coaching hours, they don't buy those basic things. They buy what they get to become emotionally and as an identity as a result of having your thing, your product or service.
Yeah. I love that diaper example. Like, that is brilliant. I never thought about that before, but that 100% makes sense. I wanted to ask you a little bit about customer loyalty, which is kind of a shifting idea a little bit in the masses. I think I saw an article recently about how people are less likely than ever to shop at the same place over and over again. Can you talk to a little bit, maybe like the biggest misconception people have about why customers would choose one brand over another, and how do you create loyalty with a customer to your brand?
That is an extraordinary question, and part of that is going to be, like, very specific to the business that we're talking about, but bigger picture and taking it from what we just talked about, like identity level. Today, we have so many choices to explore different parts of our identity, right? I
Mhm.
can shop at something super premium today, but later in the day, something super mega affordable, because then that gives me a very different part of me. So, one is that curiosity and exploration. Today, we have access to things we never have had before. Another part is also based on values. We consume less overall, like less is more. We've heard that so many times, but it really just means people go less towards having that clutter and or constant consumption, and it's more they really value what it is they buy. So they want their purchase to really represent them. Like, I'm going to buy XYZ clothing brand because they're very ethical and responsible and etc.
Mhm.
Or I'm going to invest with a small business because I want to support them. This is what I believe in. So part of that is, are you aligning yourself in that way
Mhm.
versus if it hasn't fully met their needs and it hasn't hit on the sweet spot, they're going to continue exploring something until they find that right fit.
Mhm.
There are really a lot of levels to that. And also, some things have become so much easier today that it's that the contrast becomes bigger of like things. It's not that they've become harder, but they're just stagnating more. So
Right.
there are places in the world where you can buy a car in one click, but then going through your insurance is 50,000 agonizing steps. That's
Right.
just an example, but we all have that. Friction is becoming more obvious today. So are you making it easy for people to buy from you on top of just like really giving them what they want and like real customer satisfaction? Like beyond that, are you making it easy to have a good relationship with you? And then there's also that great concept in corporate of like surprise and delight your customers. And this is where it's totally
Mhm.
like industry specific how you should do that. But can you anticipate their next need, their next question, and
Mhm.
give them something that not at the expense of like, I'm going to lose my business because this is not scalable, but something realistic that goes a long way in showing the kind of business that you are, what you stand for, how you work, and how you're willing to look after your clients.
I think there's a lot of things changing right now. I mean, in all types of business, but especially in branding. I want to ask you too about what other trends in personal or business branding do you think will matter most in the next few years that you see changing?
We could probably talk for hours just about this, but if I was to pick
Yeah.
out one that I'm particularly fascinated with, is that AI will make some of that contrast bigger. And I don't mean just in terms of friction, but you can use AI for so many things, but you think it will just solve all your problems. But if you don't know what you're amplifying or what you're automating, it will show no matter how much noise you put out there. Like coming back to our example, if you can't describe yourself and your business and what you do, then no matter how much you put on top of something that's unclear or possibly broken, it will only reflect that confusion. So
Right.
the people that already know what they're doing, they're going to jump ahead in leaps and bounds. But those of us that are still trying to figure out what we're doing and what our message should be and what our offer, it will have you run around in circles for
Right.
so long because it will keep coming up with ideas that you think they sound great, but they're still misaligned because you haven't come down to that real clarity of, well, who am I serving? What makes me different? What is it that people really buy from me at that bigger level, the deeper level? So I think the contrast is going to get bigger between the people that know what they're doing, they're getting ahead really fast, and those that are being left behind in iterating and creating, but in a really noisy way.
Yeah. It's a hugely changing world. I completely agree. I think people who are able to stay open-minded and be creative as this kind of new wave, always be learning, will be the come out on top. But it is a bit overwhelming. I want to wrap up on a more positive note. I'd love to do some rapid fires with you before we finish. Is that okay with you? Okay. Is there a branding move you've seen recently that made you say, this is amazing? Like, that's perfect.
I'm going to choose one I actually hate, but they're doing such a great job.
Yeah.
Liquid Death. I hate it that you can sell water in 50,000 ways. Like you can already have Swiss water, you can have Norwegian water, you can have exotic water, but now you can have heavy metal water or rock and roll water, if that's even a way to put it. And it's annoying because for crying out loud, like it's just water. But that is such a great example of messaging to a higher level identity and aligning your tribe with one big message.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that. Great example. Okay. Is there a trend in the online business space that you love or one that you're ready to say goodbye to?
Can we please say goodbye to the overnight success myth that you just need to post once and you're going to get 1 million followers and then you're going to post second time, you're going to double that. Every single day. And that whole glamorous life, like, can we just please stop it? The worst thing that's done is it put our expectations so high that we no longer take small steps because we're always comparing ourselves with a big target.
Do you have a go-to piece of advice for someone just starting out?
Get clear on who it is that you're serving and what people actually are buying from you. The actual transformation, the emotion, the bigger identity piece.
I love it. Do you have a dream client or a dream project you'd love to work on?
I love helping women that are leaving corporate and starting a business around their expertise.
Yeah, love that. Last question for you. My favorite question to ask everyone. Do you have a book or a podcast or a course or a resource or anything like that that you can recommend to budding entrepreneurs?
Tune into Daniel Priestley. There are some really basic business concepts that we tend to fly over and we take for granted that really change the way and how you think about what business you're actually in. Diary a CEO and YouTube and all that.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, Noemi, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
Thank you. I super enjoyed being here, so thank you for having me. You can definitely connect on LinkedIn. You can find me under Noemi Ceapa or theconsultingstudio.vip.
Thank you so much again. This has been such a good conversation. I'm so excited for people to hear this. I think everyone's going to love this. It's like so practical.
Thank you. And feel free to reach out with any additional questions, anything that comes up of like, well, what about this? What about this? What about my situation? So happy to chat further and answer any questions.
I love that. That's like gold in the bank. If you're listening to this, please take advantage of that. That is exactly what you want to hear from a founder.